coloring wigs, I have like a bunch of rules of thumb. I say it's fine to have somebody who's never worked with wigs style your wig. I think that's usually not a big deal. They can usually wash it with a little coaching or some internet research. I'm not super comfortable with people who have not worked with wigs cutting wigs, and I'm absolutely not comfortable with someone who's not worked with wigs doing any kind of color work on a wig. Reason is that almost all wigs are color processed. Most of them are not virgin. If they are, it's a different story, but most wigs are going to be slightly color processed, okay? So you have no idea the way the color will take. So best case scenario is that you find a wig that already has the highlights that you want in it. If not, it's not a big deal, but it's got to be done by somebody who specializes in working with wigs. Why? The hair sucks up. I'm not a colorist, but what I've seen is that the hair sucks up colors so much faster than hair that's on your head that you've got to be right on top of it at all times. And I have seen people come in with wigs that they have had a stylist do, and she's just not, she's a great stylist, but she's used to cutting hair, and so she's not as on top of it as she would be, and it's just kind of destroyed. So I don't do color myself, but I have a lady who, like, we send all our color to, and that's what she does. She works just on wigs, and it does make a big difference. So if you're going to use somebody, I would say try to find out if they have experience on wigs, and if not, and they're comfortable doing it, then I would say everything has got to be tested. Like, you've got to do a test piece on a wig is the most important thing. Your hair, almost everybody does it, but a test piece on a wig is extremely important. I've even seen colorists who work on wigs have their customers sign contracts saying, like, they acknowledge that it may not come out exactly the way they want. Yeah, because you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to be prepared that you don't necessarily know, like, what's going to come out, you know, when you start coloring and bleaching. Putting color on it in terms of making it darker is not really a big deal. Like, anybody can do that. But when you're bleaching, you have to know that you have to really, really be careful. And that's super important.
What about like bleaching knots and things like that? Is that something you do a lot? Or
So,
I feel like some people like bleach knots, some people don't.
So here's the thing with bleaching knots. There are like different schools of thought about bleaching knots. My knots are bleached because my hair is black, and if I don't bleach the knots, then you're gonna see them. But it's got to be done again by somebody who knows what she's doing, because there are a few things. You're sewing the hair into the lace by hand. Then you're taking the bleach and you're putting it on the lace and the knots. So it's weakening the knots, and it's probably weakening the lace a little bit also. That said, we know that lace is delicate, and that is the deal, and we are willing to, like, put up with that because of the natural look, right? So you'll bleach the knots, and then you won't see them kind of coming out of your forehead. Most people who have dark hair like that. If you have light hair, you don't need to bleach your knots, because your knots are going to be light to start out with. Now, there's another way to do it. This is tricky and hard, costs more money, is probably the best way to do it, but there's very, very few colorists who I would say I would trust to do this. Really, the best way to do it is to take blonde hair that's not, or bleach, even bleached hair is fine to use, but light hair, and sew it in as the baby hair in the front. And then after you've done that, you're gonna dye it darker, a tiny fraction of an inch above the knots, okay? That's a lot more work. That's gonna cost a lot more money, but some people feel like that's really the way to go, because it doesn't damage the knots, it doesn't damage the lace, and you don't have any, sometimes, like, you'll see that the hair in the knots, when it's bleached, can turn like a little bit too red, or, you know, and you can take it back and she can rebleach it for you, but that's like the most sort of like amazing, you know, way to do it. Does Beyonce, like, you know, do it? No, she probably doesn't. Like, I'm pretty sure her hairstylist just bleaches her knots. So I would say like 99% of people are doing it that way, and that's fine to do. But you just know, you know, again, like, those are going into it. And that's really necessary, because if you have dark hair, it's just gonna look like dark knots on your forehead, and you really don't want to see that. So that's important, because we want to use little teeny knots, and they're still going to be pretty small, but if they're black, they're going to really show up. And I think that that's like the most favorable outcome. So I do it for myself.